with an idea that there's millions of people that cannot go to school today. These are kids that they don't have access to school for so many reasons. Either they're kids or either Islamic or religious traditions or values that they don't let their kids to go to school. Either say insecurity or there's so many reasons, or some of the families or kids, they have thrown assets on their faces or anything. So they don't allow their kids to go to school. The reasons could be money. So I came up with a solution where I'm actually raising money for it, to deliver education into those kids that they cannot go, they don't have access to school, so that I can deliver school into their houses, into their homes, without a teacher. So a self-taught method, basically. So this is what happens. Most of these schools are built by the UN, by the US, by the international donor agencies. Only for the past 12 months, 1,000 schools have been shut down or have been used by different militias or insurgencies or Taliban or even the local forces, the government local forces. That's what happens. I mean, if you have a kid in Afghanistan, you wouldn't send him to school. That school was built by the USAID. I think it's in Badakhshan or somewhere. So that school has been used by the Taliban. Nobody goes to that school, and millions of dollars was spent on that school, just a building, and you cannot maintain it, you cannot secure it. So people don't send their kids there for that reason as well. I'm going to quickly pass because I make sure that I don't take a lot of your time. Some people, thrown assets on female or young children only because they wanted to go to school, only because they wanted to. That's the basic right. You want to, educate yourself. So, and let's see some, statistics. Most of these schools that are built by donor agencies, foreign countries, in particular USAID, most of them are not in use. If you see 47% of them are not in use. Money has been spent on it. And either the building has been used by the security forces or Taliban or any, but the question is that they're not in use. So a huge number of kids cannot go to school. And I was saying that for the past 12 months, 1,000 schools have been closed or shut down because of insecurity. The reason I'm giving you all the background, I'm going to tell you why I came up with this idea. So if you see the school, even the ones that are actually built and kids that go, there is no immunity in these schools. They don't have water, they don't have electricity, they don't have anything. But again, almost $900 million have been spent on building schools in Afghanistan. These are USAID's money. I'm sure there are other figures from the World Bank and other places. And then yet we have a very, very poor literacy rate in Afghanistan. If you see, if you compare this with any other country in the region, it's just uncomparable. Despite the amount of money has been spent in Afghanistan on the education sector. So if you see, school age, mostly, I'm going to pass this because the other will give you Afghanistan's. This is basically 8 million children in school at the moment. I think about 3.3 million people that are aged for the primary, from age 5 to age 10, they're out of school. That's a huge number. And then at the same time, we also have lack of teachers. We don't have qualified teachers. If you see, I'll show you one of the slides. First of all, there is a huge gap between female and male teachers in Afghanistan, and most of these teachers are unqualified. A huge number of teachers are unqualified. I came up with the idea of putting a tablet together and using the pre-existing curriculums that are available, approved by the government. I'm not going to create a new curriculum. I'm not going to, it's going to be a lot of work. So what I'm going to do is create a tablet and change the way kids learn school curriculums, and how, because they don't have access to school, so that they can play with the tablet. So what I do is I'm going to change the curriculum into a very interactive system, so that they play games, they play whatever they want to play with it. By the end of the day, they're able to learn read, write, and they can understand, the basic education. That's the easiest way for these kids to learn, because they're not allowed to go to school or they cannot have access to school. That's an alternative for education. I've already started fundraising, and I have some initial investment for it. I'm looking for a little bit more to start the prototype, and the prototype will start after that we'll start the testing and do the controlled and experiment to see whether it works or not. That's the second step. So I was talking about qualified and unqualified teachers. If you see, there's 90 to 99% teachers are considered unqualified in the major provinces. So I mean, even if they have access to education, they're facing a really big number of unqualified teachers. So I'm going to pass because I'm going to give you guys some time to ask questions. We talked about teachers. Women literacy rate in Afghanistan is very, very low. So if you age 15 and age 24 plus, we almost have about 80%. So that's really, really low. So this, what I think is, if you teach a kid, especially a girl, eventually marry and that becomes mother. Mother's education is very important to the future generation. They will make sure their kids go to school. When it comes to education, it's a generation of it's a span of generations, so that they can eventually change things. I personally see a lot of the problems in Afghanistan and elsewhere is education. Education is the key thing for insecurity, for economic, and for any sort of problems that you see, crimes or anything. It's all about education. So if you have better educations, those numbers go down a lot. So why in Afghanistan? Again, I give you those figures. I told you in terms of comparison. If you see Germany, there's 1% illiteracy rate, and in Afghanistan it's 62%. That's very, very big. I think whatever we go through today in Afghanistan is because of education first. And our neighbor, for example, Iran, is 18%. So we are in a neighborhood where everybody's education is so good. Afghanistan, one place that suffer from that. So that's what I'm basically doing. I'm going to pass these ones because this is more, it's going to take time. So this tablet basically will look something like it's Kindle. I'm sure you have one you're reading, but it's not. The reason I put that is because it's going to be the same size. The battery life is about 7 to 8 hours. So that those poor people that live in remote areas, most of them, they don't have access to a lot of things. For example, electricity is important because they have to charge it. But then this pilot will start from in Afghanistan. This project will then roll out to Pakistan, to Yemen, Sudan, a lot of places that they have a similar situation. In a lot of these places, if you see these, they have mobile phones. In Afghanistan, they have, out of 27, 28 million population, 22 people have access to phone. So that means they have a source to charge their phone. So they can charge their listening as well. So that's the product basically. It would look something like Kindle, but in a very, it has to have features so that the curriculum has to be in an interactive way so that they learn quickly. If you see, if you're married and have kids, I'm sure you've seen those kids that they go through your phone and they go to YouTube and they, start downloading songs. A kid in the U.S. having access to your YouTube and all that, there's no difference between him or her and a kid in Afghanistan or Sudan or Somalia or somewhere else. They have the same brain. They just don't have the same access to devices. That's the solutions that I have I'm going to introduce. I'm using pre-existing curriculum. I'm going to test it, and when you might ask, well, what happens if one student studies something, and then what happens? They will have a grade promotion system, so they have to pass some exam to jump to the next level, and they can, whenever if they want to move to another school, they can go give the exam. If they pass, they can sit to a class, a real class if they want to. That's it, I guess. Yeah, the distribution is something that I thought about it. You have to engage community elders and community imams or local people so that they can distribute it. The product itself has no value. It's going to be the price of a book. There's no internet connections in it. There's nothing in it. So even if they sell it to somebody else will start studying. So there's no value to it. And the value is education. So this is it. That's the solution, basically. And I'll give the floor to you guys to ask questions.
Well, thank you so much for that talk. Could you tell us a little bit more about how your previous work experience led you to personally want to be involved in this new project with your technology organization providing education?
Sure. So, by nature, I'm an entrepreneur. I have started a lot of small businesses, started a couple of businesses and became very successful. Consulting companies. I started Afghanistan's first job portal, usmonster.com. So it's one of the largest website right now. Started catering business. I started restaurant business. It became very successful. I always faced with this education, lack of education. So I was always thinking about what to do to educate Afghans. Give them schools or books, or it's a culture that people really want to study, but they don't have access. And then living in the U.S. and see kids that they really go use these iPads and start studying. That's how I thought. I was like, there is no difference between here and there. So why not have them have access to the same technology? I've worked in government, private sector. I've always sort of witnessed a lack of education in Afghanistan, which isn't the case in a lot of countries, which isn't the same case in least developing countries. Education is a key thing.
Have you thought about having the tablets be solar powered? Is there any?
Yes, we've thought about it. I think it's going to cost a little bit more money. To keep this tablet very, in terms of its value, not too expensive, because it will not be viable in terms of doing business. We thought about it to sort of do, centers for places where they can go charge, but then the solution is that people have access to a TV, a mobile phone, they can always charge it, and that doesn't cost. So, yes?
I'm curious why your focus is on the hardware development. Have you thought about partnering with, just getting Kindles or iPads and then focusing more on the software development side instead?
So absolutely, that's a really good question. the reason I'm not really worried about and I'm not focusing on the curriculum or the content of it because I'm using the pre-existing curriculums. I don't want to get into, let's say I go to Yemen, I go to some of those countries, and I don't want to get into a conflict where I introduce something else and the government or those, schools are different. So I don't have to invest a lot of money in creating a curriculum. I'm using pre-existing curriculum. Whatever they teach in their schools, whatever they have in their schools, using that, their language, whatever they teach, the only investment I do is I turn that curriculum into interactive systems so that they don't have to read and write. They have to play games with it. These kids that, in a way, put bubbles or something so that they, learn ABC and then start writing and then start practicing. So it is a lot of work to turn those curriculum into software. But I think I'm already working on it, so that's why I'm not focusing too much on that aspect of it. The hardware itself is important to make sure that it has enough battery life and
how will you message this? How will you prevent maybe some imams or clerics from coming out against it and calling it a tool of Western control? Because this happened with the One Laptop Per Child initiative when they tried to do this in Latin America. A lot of people opposed it on the grounds that it was U.S. centered.
yes. This is going to be very, very good question. This is going to be a local product, an Afghan product, a Yemeni product, a Pakistani product. Depends on where. There's nothing to do with the U.S. The reason I'm using the pre-existing curriculum is that let's say in Afghanistan they teach Islamic in the school. I'm not going to change that. It's going to be Islamic. I'm not even introducing ABC or English. It's their own language, as if they go to school. Working with all those people and branding it as a local product, something that there is no changes in it. We're not going to change brainwash those kids or something. That's important. So we have to be careful, but using the pre-existing curriculum approved by the government, approved by those people, I think that's the way to go.
I think it's useful to note that whether in Afghanistan or in other countries outside of the US and Europe, the government or the Ministry of Education actually decides on a curriculum that the whole country follows from grade 0 to grade 12. So I don't think there will be any objections in terms of the curriculum, and if there is no internet access or Wi-Fi access on these products, then I doubt that there will be any complaints to people using it or any reasons why they will be rejected.
Yes, I looked into the one child one laptop per child in India, for example. But the reason it failed because they were introduced to school kids and it was internet based. It failed because some of the people didn't have access to the internet. Some people thought, okay, they're going to have access to a lot of other things on the internet. This is pure education. As if somebody goes, sits in the school, don't have time to sit or don't have access to sit in school, sit at home, have that tablet, and start reading. Actually, they can also work, with moms and elders and at home. They can also start studying. It's a game. It's not a really, really hard studying like candles or anything like that. They will play games with it or something. But that leads to something that they will learn how to read, how to write, how to hopefully if they gradually when they pass these tests and scores, they will eventually sit in a school and give an exam and sit in one of the classes.
What's your target age ranges, and if you plan to make it go through high school, do you have any plans on course for higher education?
Well, the pilot is going to start from age 4 or 5, because this is the age where they enroll their kids to school. It's the focus is primary education. So the primary education could be from 5 to 14, or from 4 to let's say 10. If this project is successful in the primary education, then hopefully we'll do the higher education as well. But in higher education, there's a lot of curriculum, there's a lot of work. my aim is for a little girl or a little boy in Afghanistan or any of these countries to be able to read and write. And this is the first target.
The people that, whatever doing the acid attacks and stuff, do you think they're inherently opposed to the idea of education? Because then people just go and take it, not because it's worth anything.
Just a bit, yes.
Because they're like, no, we don't want anyone to be educated. Like, are you worried about
I think it's politically, putting pressure. There's two things. One is more of extremism. They just don't like women to be educated, and that's something it's hard to cope with. The other thing is it's political, and they make sure they pressure the government. So if they pressure the government through any means, they don't sort of hands off on it. Whether it's kids going to school, whether bombing schools, closing down schools, or anything. There's the back to Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about your funding sources and where you are on that so far?
So the funding is going to be crowdfunding and private investment. I have some small initial investment from private investors just to do the prototype. Then later on, once the prototype is there, once the test is done, it becomes successful, then I'll launch a massive crowdfunding. Through crowdfunding, it's education. I've already partnered with an organization called Good Fund. They will do the funding part of it. But then, my main source would be crowdfunding and also USAID, the World Bank. My target is to go to them and say, look, you have spent a lot of money and those 1,000 schools are closed. So here's an alternative. The alternative is that we bring education to their homes, not building the schools where schools are used for different purposes. Yes.
You've mentioned a little bit about what I'm about to ask you, but I'd like to hear in a bit more detail. How do you intend to make sure that the kids are actually using? Is there levels of achievements that they can reach? And also, what is your ultimate goal? How do you measure if this was successful or not? Is it reducing the literacy rate? What is it?
So what we're going to do, we're going to test it. Give 200 or 100 students these tablets. If they within 6 months or a year, if they start reading and writing, I think that's a good sign. And then comparing it against people in our books. So that's one part of the and then there's great promotion. If they're in grade 1 and then once they finish at the end of the curriculum, they test, they put up a test, and then if they pass the test, they'll go to grade 2. So that's the way to, because we can kind of monitor the number of people. The only way to know exactly how they're successful is if they sit in a school and give an exam, whether they can attend that school or not. But again, the target is for these people to be able to read and write. It's primary education. I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much once again for leaving important things aside and come here and spend some moment with me. I appreciate it.